Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which discusses any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted by Alli Naithani, and co-hosted by Uma Janga and Dr. Susan Strauss. Here's Susan.
Greetings and welcome to It's a Woman's World. I'm Susan Strauss and I am your host for today, and we have got a bang-up program for you. I would bet that there are a bundle of you that are going to be watching this thinking, the day will come where I would like to write a book. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And let me introduce the guests. First of all, we have Alli Naithani. And Alli is usually the host for this program, but today she's going to take a different position and she's going to be a student. And Alli is wanting to write a book about cooking, of all things. We also have Lindsay. And Lindsay is a 14-year-old high school student. And Lindsay is already thinking about writing a book, and she is into writing fiction. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you.
We also have Julia Tagliere. Julia is Lindsay's mom and has recently had her first book come out, Widow Woman. Then we have Betty Liedtke. Now, Betty's in a little bit different situation. Betty is in the process of creating in her mind her book. Now, she ends up writing columns, but she's going to be writing a book about her trips to Uganda and the work that she does there. And then, last but not least, we have Dara Beevas. Dara is an expert on writing, and she has written a book on how to write. So these gifted women are going to be helping Lindsay and Alli learn how to write. So let's start first of all with you, Dara.
Yeah.
How did you get into this and in writing your book about how to write?
Well, like Lindsay will discover when she goes to college in a few years, there is so much to learn about being a writer. When I went to college, Lindsay, I delved right into a literary magazine. Long story short, I loved publishing and became an English major. Not that I'm trying to pressure you, but it was so fun just being around other college students and learning the writing process. And then from there, I went into publishing, and I mentor authors as my job. That's what I get to do. So this is so fun for me because this is what I do every day. I help authors chart the course for their publishing journey. And my number one advice for writers is start with your own life experiences. Alli, you are going to be doing a cookbook, and I'm sure you have heard stories or seen women in your family, maybe men too, cooking. Maybe you've had recipes passed down. Maybe there are little anecdotes about what spices to use and why you should use them.
Okay.
And those are the things that could flavor your cookbook. Hard
Oh,
pun.
whoa, that was cool.
That no one else is going to know what your grandmother's grandmother said about what spices to use
Sure.
or what ways to make something taste different or special. So that's what I would do specifically for your cookbook, is start with your own life experiences and stories you've heard. And Lindsay, you are still young, so maybe if you're trying to think about what life experiences do I have to pull from, think about stories you've heard elders say, or even just start to look at life a little bit differently, watching people getting on and off a bus, for example. What are they wearing, and what sounds do you hear? And describe things that you like to eat, for example. And same for you, Alli. Those would be my starters for how to get going with your books.
Excellent ideas. It makes me wonder about rewriting a couple of my old ones, so that's very good. What about you, Betty? Because you're in this process of just starting to develop it, and you're in your creative mind right now. What would you suggest?
Well, a number of things, and most of it just adds on to what Dara's already said. And one of the things that I found, because the column that I write, I've been doing it weekly for 12 years, and people often ask me, where do you get your ideas? Don't you run out of ideas? And I just keep myself open all the time to what's going on around me and what might happen. And sometimes it's a line that somebody says, or a situation, or something I see, and it clicks, and I pay attention to it. I write it down, make a note of it, and then it may or may not turn into something that I write later, but often it does. And that's part of the training that you just do for yourself. Now, I was thinking of things that you both might do. And of course, one of the most basic bits of advice for writers is write what you know.
Yeah.
And I would add to
Absolutely.
that, in writing or in life or in our work, there's that sweet spot where three different things can intersect, and when they do, you're home free. And that is something that you love to do, something that you're really good at doing, and something that rewards you financially or in other ways. So if you can find something that fulfills all three of those, you've got it made. And Ali, I was thinking about you not just cooking and family recipes and things like that, which would be a wonderful thing to do, but also I know you've done cooking demonstrations on this show, and that the other people around you love when that time comes because they get to share in the finished product. And I'm sure you've got lots of stories about that, about the food itself, about the recipes, about the experience, things that go on behind the scenes. You don't have to necessarily think about it as a cookbook right from the start, but think about it as stories of your life. And a lot of people would
Great
be
advice.
interested, oh thanks, a lot of people would be interested in what goes on the show, behind the show, and those will make wonderful stories in and of themselves, and the food just adds to that.
So maybe like a memoir almost that happens to have recipes, a look into your life that shows people who you are, and then on top of that, they get to learn how to make great, delicious meals.
Okay.
And Lindsay, the same thing for you. Just think about your life, different aspects of it, and what's something that you love to do. What's something that you're really good at doing?
And then to incorporate that, for example, into her characters or into her stories, since she writes fiction, is that what you're thinking of?
Any number of ways. And don't limit yourself, because you might start out writing fiction and it might turn into a memoir. You might write
Oh,
a memory or an experience, and all of a sudden you've got a colorful character. And then write what you know doesn't mean your literal exact story, but what you know can go into amazing characters, and then you have the added fun of being able to play with them. You're the one telling them what to do, although sometimes they answer back and say, that's not what I want to do, and you'll know that in the writing.
You're
And-
teenagers.
yeah. But then that's a wonderful experience for a writer when you kind of, okay, you put your hands on the keyboard, say, okay, I'll just take a nap or daydream now. You just say whatever you want to say, and you'll find what comes out can be some of your best writing.
Great. Just tell the viewers, if you would, when you write your columns, who do you write them for and what topic areas? Because you've got such great advice, and I think it would help for them to understand where's that coming from with you.
Thank you. My column is in the Chanhassen Villager, and when I first started writing it, it was No Place Like Home. My kids were still at home, and I thought of it as kind of an Irma Bombeck type
Oh,
of
sure.
column, you know, hearth and home and the things that go on. And then there came a point when someone at the paper said to me, you know, you're going to have to change the name of your column soon because you hardly ever write about your kids anymore, about hearth and home. My kids were grown and gone. My son had gone into the Marines after he graduated. My daughter went to college in Florida, and I still wrote about them on occasion, but now I was out playing in the world in different ways and writing about that, and it was more my coming of age and going out to explore. And that's when my column changed into Find Your Buried Treasure,
Yes.
which is also my mission and passion in life, which is helping people see
Right.
things in themselves that they don't even see.
And we'll talk more about that when these two are going to be doing a little bit of writing. And Julia, what advice do you have? Now, you've got your daughter here, for one thing.
I
so,
do. I do.
And Ali.
Well, she'll take it with a grain of salt, as she always does, take Mom's advice. I would just say, I know Betty and I were talking earlier about the importance of perseverance, and I guess that would be my biggest piece of advice, is when you are setting out to do something as monumental as to create a book, it can seem just overwhelmingly large, and what you need to do is to break it down into manageable pieces for you. And some days That manageable piece might just be, today I need to do some soft writing, the process where you're just maybe taking a walk around the park and just letting your mind wander to come up with the inspiration that you need. You can't force inspiration to come. It comes at its own whim, and you need to take advantage of it. But you can put yourself into a position of being able to take advantage of that by understanding that that's how your creativity will work, and not to be intimidated by the fact that it doesn't come all at once, like a book, delivered with a ribbon from the sky. It doesn't happen
work
that
that
way.
way?
No,
It would be nice.
I wish it did. The truth is that, and I can't speak for anybody else, I know for myself that this book came over a number of years in fits and starts. Sometimes life interfered and I wasn't able to do the writing that I needed to. Sometimes it was inspiration. Sometimes it was, I was struggling with character development, and I just, the character was saying, that's not me. Stop making me do that. And I couldn't figure out what those pieces were. So the most important thing for me that I would give as advice is to say, don't give up when you hit those pieces, because that's a normal part of the process. It's part of the process. And it makes you, I guess, it feels more gratifying when you work through those, because you know that you stuck with it and you still managed to get through those hills and valleys of the inspiration process and came out on the other side with what was always meant to be there.
How do you begin? Where do you grab that creativity to begin writing that first sentence?
When you go to prepare that amazing favorite dish, what do you have in your mind? And if someone was going to be creating that dish, what would your advice be to them? That would be, I think, the best first line. So what would that be?
And then you said, Dara, too, that you talk in terms of tapping into that creativity piece with beginning to write, about doing some mind mapping with that. Maybe this would be a time for you to mention that, and what role would that play then when you first put your pen to the paper?
Absolutely. Lindsay, for you, if you could pick one word, just one word, that you would say that word describes the kind of piece that you want to write. Just come up with one word. What would that word be?
Funny.
Funny. That's a fantastic word. So what you would do is you'd write funny in a little bubble on your piece of paper there. And then what you could do is branch off from funny with different words that come to mind. Don't think about it too much. Just have fun with it. A word might be something that makes you laugh that's funny. It could be a joke that you've heard. It could be something that you saw someone wearing that was super funny. Or it could be something that isn't funny, that people think is funny, that's not funny. So what you want to do is you want to branch off from that word funny, and you want to jot down any words that pop into your head. And like I said, do not think about, oh, is this the right word? There's no right or wrong word. You want to just go with the flow and just have fun coming up with whatever pops into your mind first.
All right, what about you? What would you suggest as they go to use that creative bent and start actually writing that first sentence and paragraph, Betty?
Even before you start writing, you need to do something up here, and that is remember that nothing that you put down is set in stone. And quite often, the first things we write, not only they can get edited and edited, but they might get edited right out. In The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron talks about writing morning pages, 3 pages, longhand, just stream of consciousness, and this is to get the garbage out, to get all that stuff gone. And I remember a story from another a famous writer, although I don't remember who it is now, and she talked about a class that she took. And the teacher was very, very annoying, because no matter what anyone wrote, when they turned it in, she would tear off the first couple pages, hand it back, and say, okay, this is where your story starts. And that was pretty presumptuous and annoying, and the most annoying part about it was that she was absolutely right.
Yeah. I think
So just,
excuse me, go
I
ahead.
was going to say, so just start writing. If it's something that has nothing to do with what you're going to write, start writing anyway. The stuff will go away and the good parts will come.
I think one of the best pieces of advice I got when I started writing was get it down first, then get it right. And that's what I do. I
great
just
advice.
want to get it
Yep.
down and get my thoughts in order. Now I have a friend who's writing. She doesn't do it that way. She spends all her time right from the beginning with sentence structure and the correct vocabulary. it would drive me nuts to do that, but we all do it differently. But that's always worked for me, whether I was writing a college paper or my books. Julia, what would you say in terms of starting out in that first paragraph and creativity?
I would echo what Betty said about don't focus on the first sentence, because I think that was what the initial question was there is so much pressure to think this is the first sentence. And if they don't get hooked by this first sentence, the whole book is lost. You can't think about it like that. Because for me, at least, my first sentence probably changed 50 times before the book was finished. And it was affected by things that I learned in the process of writing the rest of the book. Things that happened to me during the course of the writing changed what I wanted that opening to be, how I wanted the reader to feel, what I wanted to draw them in with. So don't get hung up on the thought that it's a first sentence. Your first sentence of your book may be the last sentence chronologically that you write. So don't get hung up on that. And I think in terms of jotting down bits and pieces, I'm not an expert on cookbooks. I would be the first one to say I need a really good cookbook, and Lindsay would probably second that. But I would say in terms of one of the things that helped me to get started in a really concrete way with fiction writing, at least, was I do something that's like a character map. Only there's no diagramming or anything. I write the character's name, what I think it's going to be, because that changes also. And then I write down every single little thing I can think about that person. If, what do they smell like? Do they wear perfume? What is their hair texture? Do they have a nervous tic or a habit? Is there a favorite color that they like? Is there something quirky about them that makes them different? And so I write down all of the little details, and the more I know about that character, the more effortless it is when I start to have those characters interact with each other, because I already know who they are. I don't have to think about that. And that's not a first sentence. That's all preparation.
Okay, you two, now it's up to you. We're going to give you a little assignment, and we want you to start writing. And while you write, you can just ignore us. We're going to sit here and chit-chat about what it's like to be an author and writing, and then we're going to have you read to us what you wrote, okay? So have fun. Go at it. I know one other thing, too, that for me, and I didn't write fiction, and I'm certainly not writing a cookbook, and I wouldn't be able to do that, but you aren't writing fiction either, but I know for me when I started writing, I didn't start in the beginning of the book either. In fact, I started with the topic that I thought was going to be, it's where my passion was initially and where I was in the mood for that day. And it could have been chapter 3. So, but mine doesn't have to be read chronologically either. But so that worked for me. And then the other thing that I do, tell me if you do this, is sometimes I would get tired of writing in one chapter, and I'd just get bored with it, and I'd get like a writer's block. So then I would go to the next chapter, and I would start writing something there. So sometimes I skipped around and went back and forth. I don't know how that works for fiction. For you, I suppose when you're writing columns, that's kind of do that anyway. I don't know about your Uganda, but when you write, do people do that very often, where they kind of skip around, or is that a sign of a fragmented mind?
I think that everyone's writing process is different, and I think that writers can get hung up on how am I supposed to do this.
Good
My
point.
little secret for my book was that I started my book as a blog first.
I've heard others doing that.
I had a nice head start. My book ended up being around 70,000 words. But in the beginning, I pulled all of my blogs into one manuscript, and it was really, really rough, and it was ugly, and it wasn't a manuscript, but it gave me the confidence to say, there's something here.
Yes.
Make this into something useful for other people and shape it into a book. And that was super helpful. And that's something that you might do, Betty, with
That's
your
what
columns.
I was thinking with your columns, Betty.
If you ever wanted to pull it into a cohesive book with all of your gems in one place, that would give you an enormous head start. I wouldn't suggest printing that as is. If I had done that, it would not have been pretty. If you did it, Betty, it probably would be pretty.
I don't know about that.
Do that with copyright. Do you know? I mean, because you wrote that for the newspaper, so
Yes, but I have the rights.
you do have the
Yes.
rights, okay. Because
And
when
they're
I've
very
written things,
supportive.
I've lost my rights on stuff. So I can't, like articles that I publish,
reprint
I
them.
can't. I don't own the copyright. So that's why I was curious. You own it. That's
Yes.
good. So what about for fiction writing? That's, to me, that is such a total out there. I
Yes,
could never
Julia,
do it.
what's your
How do you
secret?
do that?
Speaking of fragmented minds, for me, I think that point about that everybody's process is different is probably the most critical point I've heard, is that there are so many resources out there. You could go crazy if you read every single writing book and blog. There's so much out there that you feel like I must be doing something wrong because I'm not doing what this person says to do.
Yeah.
It's so personal and it's so private, but I also write like that, where I would get tired of working on trying to figure out what was wrong with chapter 2, and I felt stuck in the mud, and I thought, you know what, I already know what's going to happen in chapter 5, so I'm just going to set chapter 2 aside, let it simmer up here on the back burner mentally, and I'm going to go work on chapter 5 and get that out, because for me, that the effect of completing one of the other chapters was very powerful.
Yes, I
It was
agree.
like unclogging
Yes.
a block,
Yeah,
because I could,
Finish.
because then I could go back and now I know what to do on chapter 2, because the whole time I was working on 5, 2 was up here,
Yes.
fixing itself in the back of my head. I just had to let it do that.
Betty, where are you at with your book on Uganda? And Betty has taken at least one trip to Uganda, 2 trips, and she's going back again this summer, correct? And she does some work in Uganda, helping some indigent folks and working with girls that are, some of them are prostitutes, and wonderful work she's doing with some folks there. So have you actually started writing the book yet?
I have. In fact, it's a lot further along
Okay.
than just still up here.
Okay.
It started with a journal that I was keeping when I was in Uganda in the first trip. And then I thought when I would come home, I would transcribe it and there would be my book. Wasn't quite that easy. But when I came home, I found the transition of easing back into life here was very rich with experience as well. So I was transcribing the book from the beginning, but I was also writing more and adding to
Oh.
that. So I figured that, okay, when this catches up to this, wherever I am at that point, then I'll
Gotcha.
put it together. But then what happened was it was all first person, well, it still will be, but October 8th, 10 p.m., this
Okay.
and that. And that really wasn't going to be the best way to tell the story. It was a little more one-dimensional. So I went back to change the format. And so that's when I get to a certain degree and then get caught up in something else. And then I was getting ready to go to Uganda again. And I'm thinking, okay, well then I'll have to add that trip. So there are a lot of things that had me stopped and stalled. But I am working on it again very, very diligently and plan to. The next time we gather the groups and we're all here together, I'll
have
hold
your
up my
book.
book.
Good. So
that'd be so
this
fun.
last trip, or I shouldn't say last trip, is the next trip going to be the last segment that's incorporated into the book?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Because I think this book may end with Christmas after we got back from the first trip.
Oh,
but I have
okay.
the advantage of being beyond that.
Yeah.
And it's not that foreshadowing and things will be there, but I know a little bit more about what's going to happen than I did then. So
Okay.
it helps me to write
Good.
that part.
Good. I'll be looking forward to reading that.
Thank you.
Just a quick check-in, you two. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Pretty good?
Yeah. Right.
Any questions
Coming
for these
well.
folks before we let you finish?
Great advice, so thank you for that.
Okay, well, go ahead and keep writing. We're going to keep chatting. So, Dara, you have an English major, I can't even imagine, and so, I mean, I just, I still get mixed up when I'm writing on where you end up putting commas, and of course, that's probably not so much English, is it, or is it?
That's proofreading.
Proofreading, but
nice
it's
if
also
you're an
knowing your
English major
grammar.
and you know where to put punctuation. There are 2 good resources. If you really just need a resource to turn to really quick to answer a rule on punctuation or grammar,
Yeah.
my favorite is the Chicago Manual of
Yeah.
Style.
Woohoo.
If you're writing
Yes.
books for the general
Okay.
audience. And then I
CMS.
have another little book that's my little trick that I go to. It's a book called Edit Yourself, and it's by Bruce Larson.
Edit Yourself.
And basically, it is a reference tool you go through, and it tells you what words to cut, what words to replace with other words that are better words, that are more concise. And those 2 books are what I think every writer should have in their library.
Is that one thinner, though? Because I
It's
know
super
that.
thin.
Okay, I'm going to get
It's-
that
It's
name
less
for
than
you.
150 pages.
Oh, I like that idea.
It's fantastic.
All
There's
right.
also
There are
the
a number of-
classic Strunken White also is very small, very thin, and it's been around for
Great.
50
Yeah.
years, so it's very easy and manageable to use.
Sometimes you just got to
Good.
go to a book and just open it up and say, is this the right thing?
That's right. I do it online sometimes. We're starting to run out of time, and I want us to have time to hear what Alli and Lindsay have written. So do you have a choice as to who's going to read first?
Want to start, Lindsay?
Sure.
All right, Lindsay, how'd you like that? What do you say? You got somebody older telling you what to do. Okay. Go ahead.
Out of the way! Melissa pushed me aside as she walked with her perfect posse down the hall. I hit the floor and watched her Michael Kors wedges disappear around the corner. A black-nailed hand helped me up. Don't pay attention to her. You won't have to deal with her anymore as soon as school ends. I looked into the face of my best, and only, friend. He had never actually told me his name. The harsh lights glinted off his lip and eyebrow piercings and made his black-lined eyes appear even darker. I know. I just hate that I let her push me around so much. I looked down at my bare shoulder, covered in a sleeve tattoo that I had gotten for my 18th birthday in September. I couldn't wait to get away from this place. All the girls with their designer brand clothing and...
Wonderful. That's excellent. Excellent.
writing. I can't wait
Yes,
to read
that
it.
sounds superb.
Definitely
Okay,
English
Ali,
major in making.
go ahead.
I
Let's-
don't think I want to go now.
Oh, sure, you're writing about food. We want to hear about it.
Okay. Well, I'll give it a shot. This was interesting. Okay. South meets North and the journey began. My story starts with my background being of Indian descent, raised in the United States. The North is my husband, who is of North Indian descent. When I met my husband and we got married, I was lost and I wanted to cook so badly. I didn't know where to begin. I wanted to cook for my husband and make delicious food. I went back to the memories of watching my parents cook as a child. I remember watching my parents take a hammer and crack a coconut and watch the juices flow from that coconut. My mother could also magically chop the head and the tail and skin a fish in like under 5 minutes. My question is, would I ever get there?
Oh, wonderful. That's excellent.
I love the detail
Excellent.
about the coconut.
I
Love
did
that.
too, the ham
So
and the
wonderful.
juices, so that was applying to those senses. That was excellent.
Beautiful. Drew me in completely.
Yes.
Drew me in.
I think the two of you are off to a grand start, don't you?
Yes,
Absolutely. It's wonderful.
We are.
Good teachers, right.
Well, I think you are. I have to say, as I was writing this, though, what I appreciated was you said just your collective words were just let it come and don't be afraid about like that end product. And I think for me, I just started writing, and and then you said think of your own story, and that's so true. We all have something to offer, right? And I think
Absolutely.
I was too tied up in what you said. You needed to just let go. So that helped.
That was helpful.
Absolutely.
Was there anything in particular that they informed you about that you found useful?
Actually, I started off with Melissa, the prissy girl, and I used the character mapping that my mom mentioned. And I
Moms
actually,
come handy once in a while.
and I wound up developing a whole different character
Oh,
out
great,
of Melissa,
great.
just the complete opposite of her.
Great. It sounds like your advice was helpful for them. And I hope that the advice that you heard today might be helpful for those of you that are contemplating writing that all-important book. So thank you for joining It's a Woman's World, and we'll see you in the next session. Bye-bye. That was fun.
Oh my gosh, this was
That was very fun. And you two did a grand job, and I thought I learned so much listening to you. Really. Thank you. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, very good. Did a great job.